the question is, in these times especially, but also generally, if you haven't really considered nutrition before, kind of like where to start. And so I think that's a very common question for people who maybe haven't considered sort of the nutrients of foods and thinking about how to pair foods before. It can seem overwhelming to just jump into that world. So I would say that I start by thinking about food groups first and really focusing on what to add in rather than what to keep out. I think that's just a really important mindset to have when it comes to nourishing yourself. Because when we start to think about making this big long list of things that we aren't going to have, it's really hard to stick to that. That's why 95% of diets fail, because people have made these restrictions that aren't realistic over time. So I really like to encourage people to focus on adding things in. And the big three are proteins, vegetables, and a healthful fat. If you go to the Simply Be website later this week, you can download the free ebook resource, and it has information on why those three food groups are the most optimal to start with, and some different foods from each of those food groups to choose. It certainly doesn't mean that things like fruits or energizing carbohydrates or occasional treats, it's not saying that any of those things are off limits, but if we can kind of create this basic template to focus on making sure we're getting adequate protein, vegetables, and a healthful fat. Those are going to keep our brain, our metabolism, our organs, everything's going to be kind of, humming along the way we want it to, so that we feel our best. So those are my tips for where to begin, and keep meal preparation really simple at first. Grilling meat or cooking it in a way that you're familiar with. If you eat meat, going to some foods that you've had before and ways that you've cooked them, trying to keep things just sort of clean. Preparation doesn't have to be long and complicated. I think if people try and pick out these really long recipes, it can feel daunting. So there's nothing wrong with a piece of grilled chicken, avocado, some vegetables or salad, or foods you're familiar with in those food groups, combining them and just making sure that you're having those present at as many meals during the day as possible.
One of the questions that I've gotten often is, how do I know when a food choice is the right food choice? Because if we're not talking about restriction and limiting diets, then how do we know when this cake is okay? Or how do we know when this cupcake is okay? And the guideline is, if this food, if this, whatever it is with kindness and is with intention, then you can know when the decision is right for you. So when you're at a birthday party or when you're at a work event and there's cupcakes and cake, then that food is kindness, because it's a part of the celebrating, it's a part of experiencing. You can say, okay, the cupcake is here, it's a party, it is kind, and it is a mindful choice. Now the question is, if the cupcake or the cake is mindful and kind, if you buy a 6-pack from the grocery store and eat 3 on the way home. And that happens all the time. Like, I'm not even saying that as a joke, because it happens all the time with the clients that I work with. And the question is, well, is that kind to yourself to have 3 cupcakes before you get home? And when you peel back the layers, what we find out is they didn't eat lunch and they're starving. And so in the car, of course, they naturally want to go for the cupcake. And it's not kind because you didn't prioritize your lunch period and your lunchtime. So we peel that back and we figure out, okay, that wasn't a good choice because it wasn't good for your heart, your mind, your soul, for you as self-care. And thinking about those sort of treats as just another food group that you should always have included. It's not a forbidden food group. It is a food group, and it is meant to be enjoyed and had. It's just meant to be enjoyed and had in a way that is kind and loving towards yourself, and not punishing or neglecting, if that makes sense. So from a eating disorder or behavioral standpoint, that's one way to build a better relationship with food.